Get him out of the boardroom. The words exploded like a grenade across the 40th floor of Northbridge Tech's headquarters, a glass and steel monument perched high above the skyline like a king surveying his kingdom. The boardroom, a sleek, minimalist space lined with touchscreen panels, digital whiteboards, and a 30-foot-long mahogany table, had fallen into stunned silence. All eyes swiveled toward the massive double doors, now ajar. Standing there, framed in the golden glow of the hallway lights, was a boy. No more than 16. Skinny. Dark curls, slightly unkempt. A navy blue hoodie hung off his shoulders, and a weather-worn backpack sagged on one side. In his hand was a small, spiral-bound notepad, smudged with ink, edges dog-eared. His sneakers squeaked awkwardly as he took a step inside, clearly unsure if he should keep going. He looked like he had walked into the wrong building. But he hadn't. I said get him out. Harold Grant roared again, slamming a hand down on the polished table. The chief operating officer's usually composed face was turning a deep, angry red. This is a confidential crisis meeting. How did a janitor's kid even get up here? A few executives exchanged confused glances. A couple reached for their phones, ready to call security. But the boy didn't move, didn't run, didn't panic. He adjusted the strap of his backpack higher onto his shoulder, took one deep breath, and let his eyes settle on the giant LED screen at the end of the room. It showed a brutal graph of red lines diving, numbers blinking in warning, a visual representation of a company in freefall. He spoke. His voice was calm, clear, unshaken. Your algorithm has a recursive loop, he said. It's corrupting your data lake every 18 minutes. The solution is to reverse the logic on your predictive filter and segment your AI output by region, not volume. The words hung in the air. Dead silence followed. Executives blinked, trying to register what they just heard. Some frowned in confusion. A few scoffed. One man actually chuckled under his breath. But then, from the far end of the room, someone whispered, "Wait, how the hell does he know that?" No one answered. The boy, still standing, still holding nothing but his notepad, lifted his chin slightly. "My name's Elijah Carter," he said. "I've been watching your system crash for weeks. I fixed it on a backup server in your sub-basement last night." Gasps rippled down the table. "Fixed it?" Someone echoed. "Who is this kid?" Another muttered. "Elijah Carter, son of Angela Carter, the night shift cleaner who mopped those very floors. High school junior. Self-taught coder. Invisible the most. But in the next 5 minutes, he would solve a $100 million problem that had brought Northbridge Tech to its knees and turned the entire future of the company upside down. And they had no idea what was about to hit them. Elijah Carter didn't grow up in boardrooms. He grew up in the shadows of them, quiet corners, forgotten closets, under flickering lights and buzzing vending machines. His world was never filled with polished shoes and pressed suits. It was filled with mop buckets, cleaning rags, and the hum of old computer fans. His mother, Angela Carter, had worked as the night shift cleaner at Northbridge Tech for over 12 years. Every evening, just as the last wave of employees headed for the elevators, Angela would arrive, wearing her gray janitor's jumpsuit, hair tied up in a wrap, lunch in a plastic bag, and tired but proud in her silence. She cleaned every inch of the 40-story tower with a kind of quiet dignity. The staff barely noticed her, but she noticed everything. And she never once asked for more than a steady paycheck and enough to feed her son. Elijah, after finishing school, would ride the bus to the building and wait for her. Most nights, he'd sit quietly in the break room, surrounded by untouched coffee pots, abandoned bagels, and cold fluorescent lighting, while she cleaned floor by floor. But Elijah never complained. In fact, he loved those hours. Because that building, it was full of discarded treasure. In the tech department's recycling bin, he found broken tablets, half-dead laptops, tangled cords, and once, even a damaged server module tossed aside like trash. Elijah's mind lit up at the sight of it. Where others saw junk, he saw possibilities. He took the server module home in his backpack. At their small apartment, he turned their kitchen table into a laboratory. While his mom fried chicken or folded laundry, Elijah sat surrounded by wires and microchips, studying the machine's insides like a surgeon performing delicate work. He didn't have YouTube tutorials or fancy tools. He used library books, free PDFs, and instinct. Over a few weeks, he restored that broken module. Then he went further, using it to simulate business algorithms and create mock environments based on the glimpses of code he'd seen on office monitors. Angela would occasionally look over and raise an eyebrow. "All that blinking stuff better not start a fire." "It won't," Elijah would grin. "It's running simulations." "I don't know what that means," "Baby," she'd say with a tired laugh, "but if you can dream it, you can build it." What she didn't know was that Elijah had been secretly memorizing pieces of corporate code. Engineers often left screens unlocked, and Elijah, sitting quietly nearby, would read every line, study every command, trace logic sequences in his mind, and go home to rewrite them better. He knew how the company's AI systems worked, sometimes better than the people who built them. So when Northbridge Tech's AI, responsible for over 40% of their client-facing data services, started crashing, returning false outputs, and triggering lawsuits, Elijah didn't panic. He already knew what the problem was, and he made a decision no one saw coming. He walked into the boardroom, ready to speak. Back in the Northbridge Tech boardroom, tension hung so thick it felt like the air itself might shatter. The faces around the gleaming table were pale, drawn tight with stress. This wasn't just any emergency. It was a full-blown corporate catastrophe. Just hours earlier, the company had lost a $25 million contract with one of its largest logistics clients. 3 more major clients were threatening to pull out. Stock prices were beginning to wobble. Investors were nervous. And worst of all, no one had a solution. Every engineer on staff had tried. Every contractor had failed. Northbridge had flown in specialists from 3 different time zones and paid consulting firms tens of thousands, only to end up with blank stares and excuses. Now, seated at the head of the table, CEO Victoria Langston, a woman known for being both brilliant and brutally efficient, rubbed her temples with one hand and scrolled through damage reports with the other. She'd just stepped off a 10-hour flight from Europe. Her eyes were bloodshot, her jaw clenched, and in the middle of this high-stakes storm stood a kid, a skinny teenage boy in a hoodie and sneakers. The janitor's son, Elijah Carter. Victoria looked at him with a hard, calculating gaze. "You said the AI loop is corrupting the data every 18 minutes, she said, voice cool. "How do you know that?" Elijah, who stood gripping a spiral-bound notebook so tight his knuckles were white, took a steady breath. Then he stepped forward. "I've been watching your model outputs for weeks," he began. "There's a hidden feedback loop tied to your geolocation filter. When the system reaches more than 500 concurrent entries, especially across regions, it starts feeding the same false positive signal back into the main output stream." He flipped open his notebook, revealing pages of meticulously written code and diagrams. "It's self-replicating," he continued. "Every cycle amplifies the error. That's why your predictive models are degrading by the hour." Harold Grant, the COO, let out a loud, derisive scoff. "That's absurd. Deloitte reviewed that infrastructure 2 months ago. Are we seriously letting a janitor's kid claim he knows more than the top analysts in the country?" Victoria didn't blink. She raised one hand. "Let him finish." Elijah turned a page in his notebook and pointed to a specific block of handwritten code. "If you isolate the geofilter here and reverse the sort logic to prioritize region instead of volume, it cuts the feedback loop. I tested it last night. I found an old backup server in your basement. It was slow, but it worked." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Then, "Pull up the test environment," Victoria ordered. One of the lead engineers, Priya Banerjee, quickly turned her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. She took Elijah's code and entered it line by line. Everyone leaned forward, eyes glued to the screen. 30 seconds. A bar flashed green. 60 seconds. "No system error," Priya muttered, eyes wide. "Output clean." Another pause. Then she looked up. "He's right," she said softly. "He just solved what 12 of us couldn't." Tools. The room exploded. It was as if someone had tossed a grenade into a nest of boardroom egos. Chairs scraped back. Voices rose. Executives shouted over one another. Some clapped, astonished and impressed. Others protested angrily, as if reality itself had been insulted. "Unbelievable," one manager gasped. "This is madness," another blurted. And then a Harold Grant, the chief operating officer, stood up so fast his chair tipped over behind him. "This is insane," he bellowed, his face flushed crimson. "You're going to let a child override the work of an entire department? He's not certified. He's not even out of high school. This is a corporate liability waiting to happen." Elijah stood completely still. His hands were still holding the open notebook. His heart was hammering, but he kept his face calm. Across the room, CEO Victoria Langston didn't say a word at first. Instead, she stepped away from her chair and walked around the long table, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. Every eye followed her. She stopped directly in front of Elijah. "You said you tested this on a backup server?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "Yes, ma'am," Elijah said, meeting her gaze. "Alone?" He nodded once. Victoria studied him for a long moment. The room went still again. "And how did you learn all this?" Elijah hesitated, then shrugged slightly. "I read your engineer's code. The ones they left on open terminals. I improved it at home." Someone in the back sucked in a breath. A few heads turned toward Harold. Harold lost control again. "You hear that? That's a security breach. You shouldn't be getting an award. You should be banned from the building. That's intellectual theft." But Victoria turned to him, her expression now ice cold. "You want to ban the only person who actually fixed the problem?" she said, her voice razor sharp. "You'd rather preserve your pride than save the company?" Harold opened his mouth, then shut it. He knew better than to push further. Victoria turned back to Elijah. "What's your name again?" "Elijah. Elijah Carter." She paused. "Angela Carter's son?" He nodded again. "Yes, ma'am." A flicker of something softened her eyes. Recognition. Respect. She smiled, a rare, genuine thing. "Tell your mom she has the night off," she said. "You're staying for dinner." Elijah blinked. "Wait, really?" "And tomorrow," she continued, straightening, "we're drawing up your internship papers." From across the room, Harold nearly shouted, "Internship." Victoria turned to him, her patience gone. "No," she said coolly. "Full mentorship. With me. And a paid contract. Effective immediately." A stunned silence fell. Gasps. Murmurs. A few people even applauded. "Elijah Carter just saved this company," Victoria said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "That's worth more than any degree on your walls." Then she walked back to her seat and calmly opened her laptop. The meeting wasn't over, but the future had just shifted and everyone in the room knew it. Within days, the world knew his name. Elijah Carter. What started as hushed murmurs in corporate circles became breaking headlines on major networks. News outlets couldn't get enough of him. Teen prodigy saves Fortune 500 firm from collapse, blared across morning television. Janitor's son solves $100 million tech meltdown in minutes, read another, accompanied by a grainy photo of Elijah standing next to CEO Victoria Langston, still in his hoodie and worn-out sneakers, notebook in hand. Social media exploded. LinkedIn was filled with think pieces. Tech leaders praised his raw brilliance. Silicon Valley insiders called him a once-in-a-generation mind. College recruiters flooded the company's inbox trying to reach him. Venture capital firms offered him money before he had even graduated high school. But through it all, Elijah didn't change. He still wore the same hoodie to meetings. Still jotted down notes in the back of the cafeteria while sipping chocolate milk. Still rode the evening bus home with his mother, sitting beside her as she leaned on his shoulder, too tired to speak but glowing with pride. Every night, he walked her to the elevator and waited until the doors closed. That part of his routine never changed. Victoria Langston made sure Elijah's new position wasn't just symbolic. She gave him a real role. He was paired with a senior AI researcher as a private mentor, given access to the company's most secure internal labs. And every Friday, he sat in closed-door sessions with directors and executives, offering insight, and often finding flaws in their billion-dollar strategies. He became known for saying little, but when he did speak, everyone listened. Victoria also invited him to deliver a 10-minute keynote at the company's annual Innovation Summit. The crowd of over 4,000 employees gave him a standing ovation before he even spoke a word. He used those 10 minutes not to brag, but to talk about unseen potential. "There are kids like me everywhere," he said from the stage. "Kids who sit in silence, not because they have nothing to say, but because no one's listening." But the real moment, the one that meant more than the headlines, the applause, or the money, came late one evening, long after the office had cleared out. Elijah wandered down a quiet hallway on the lower floors, past the storage rooms, past the vending machines, until he reached the old janitor's closet, his old waiting spot. He pushed the door open slowly and stopped. There, mounted on the wall where a rusty mop hook used to hang, was a gleaming golden plaque. Etched into it were the words, "The Elijah Carter Innovation Lab, proof that brilliance can come from anywhere." His throat tightened. A soft voice behind him whispered, "I told you, baby." Angela Carter stepped inside, her eyes shining with tears. She squeezed his hand. "If you can dream it," she said. Elijah smiled, fighting back emotion. "You can build it." And that's exactly what he did. From the son of a night cleaner, to the mind reshaping the future of an empire.